Good morning. You are listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. I am your host, Doug Dennison, and we are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, the nation's oldest city, at WFOY 1240 AM studios. Through the power of the internet, this program is being streamed worldwide on 1240news.com. The show will also be archived on rawauctions.com, as they are the host of this program. Additionally, this show will be posted on youtube.com. We're going to be talking about real estate auctions, past auctions, upcoming auctions, different real estate markets across the country. We've got a lot of topics today to help us out. We've got some very, very good guests, and I'm looking forward to that. Just so you know, our radio show mission statement is to provide an educational experience for listeners in a promotional format for auctions across the country. The show is, I think, 16 months old, something like that. So we're very proud of it. Every Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard or Eastern Daylight Time, we come on. And again, we get the best of the bankers, of the government employees, the brokers, the auctioneers, telling you about what's happening in real estate, telling you what's happening in regards to real estate auctions. So very, very pleased to have you aboard this morning. It's a beautiful sunny day in St. Augustine, and it's been a little warm. Our first caller used to be where I was from, up in the New England area, so I think New England is a little cooler right now, but I'm not sure. We'll ask him about that. And also, we're going to be talking about a brand new auction. It's a bankruptcy auction in Ocala, Florida. It is a 119-acre horse farm. It's going to be held on Friday, August 24th, 11 a.m. Looking forward to having that auction. I will be telling you about it more. If you're at a computer right now, go on www.rawauctions.com, www.rawauctions.com, and you can find out about that brand new bankruptcy auction, which will be held on Friday, August 24th. We're going to be talking about government auctions, how they work. I've been up to Washington, D.C. several times. Met the leaders in Congress, in various federal agencies, and found out more what they're looking for. But let's go to our first caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Doug. It's Ralph Connor at GSA.
Well, Ralph, thank you so much for calling in on this Friday, and I appreciate the time and effort. You are from the GSA, which is the General Service Administration. You are the Director of Real Property up in Washington, D.C. Tell us what you do and a little bit about your background, sir.
Sure. General Services Administration is made up of a couple of different business lines. The real estate business line is known as the Public Building Service. My office, the Office of Real Property Utilization, we're part of the Public Building Service, and we work with every federal landholding agency in the government. So everybody from DOD to the Coast Guard, to USDA, the Department of Interior, Small Business Administration, Department of Commerce, you name it. If they're a federal landholding agency, we work with them. And what we do is we work with them to help them better understand the assets that they have and to develop strategies to better use the underutilized, underperforming, or identify strategies to get rid of their unneeded property. So we're looking at everything from consolidations, relocations, exchanges, dispositions, public sales, negotiated sales, public benefit discount conveyances, a whole host. We look at the entire menu of real estate authorities because, as you know, Doug, everything the government does needs to be tied back to a legislative authority that allows them to do that.
Yes.
So we look to identify the right authority, understand the asset, its characteristics, its amenities, its challenges, its environmental conditions, its historic issues, endangered species, wetlands. There's a whole host of issues we have to understand. well as the traditional real estate issues. Proximity to major metropolitan areas, proximity to transportation, airports, rail, what the market conditions in that particular area are. But very important to the kinds of transaction strategies we pull together is there's a big difference between publicly owned property and privately owned property. The publicly owned property works very closely with the local communities to develop these strategies. So a big part of our strategy, of our process, is engagement with the local communities and understanding what the potential reuses could be. So that's an awful lot to jam into a quick background, but that'll give us a little more to talk about.
No, absolutely, and I want to thank you. I've been up to Washington, D.C. A couple of times in the last, I'm going to say 12 months, and you were kind enough to let me come in and hear about GSA and what they've done a couple of times, and I really appreciate that. I actually worked for a GSA auction 2 times, I believe. Many years ago, they were both successful, and it was a thrill to be working for the government, for the GSA. You and I have a background. We're both from New England. I can hear the Boston accent.
That's true. That is true. Yep. Born and raised in the Boston area. So.
I was born in Greenfield, Mass., but also worked at the Boston YMCA for a couple of years, and so know the area very well. And the Red Sox did extremely well last night. 9th inning, nice hit, home run, game winner.
Nothing more exciting than a walk-off homer in the 9th. My God.
How did you get into this position, into real estate? I always like to ask my guests how they got into it, because it's I know how I got into real estate auctions, and it's a weird step each and every way. But how did you get into this position?
Well, I guess I'll take you back a little bit. I came down to D.C. right after college, and I went to work for the local member of Congress.
Okay.
And I worked for him for about 5 years, and I left there, and I became a government affairs guy working for a private sector association.
Okay.
And while I wasn't directly involved in real estate at the time, I was very directly involved with environmental issues.
Uh-huh.
And, in federal real estate, the environmental issues are really the major, they're the long pole in the tent in any time frame that we deal with. So anyway, after about 5 years of working in the private sector, there was an opportunity to get back into the government. So I looked at, I applied for a job at GSA in the Congressional Affairs Office. So I went into Congressional Affairs, and that was back in 1997. And one of my responsibilities was the Office of Real Property Utilization and Disposal. That was one of the areas that I was given to manage. And, anytime you're talking about giving away property, communities and members of Congress are very interested in it.
Oh, yes.
It's very, very visible from a political standpoint. So that put me kind of right in the middle of that from 97 to 2000. And then in 2000, there was a position open. I applied for that within Public Building Service, the Office of Real Property Utilization and Disposal. I applied for that. I got that job. They actually moved me to Boston for that job. I thought I was home. I thought I was never coming back to D.C. And a few years later, in 2004, went through a major reorganization in the Public Building Service, and a position opened up at the next level for me. So I applied for that, and they moved me back down to D.C. So here I am, and I've been. This utilization division was new in 2004. So I stood up that program in 2004, and I've been there ever since. So 2004 till today, developing this utilization program, working with agencies, helping them try to identify and get rid of their unneeded assets.
Well, that's wonderful. When I met you the second time, I had the pleasure to meet with some of your staff members, and they seemed very excited and very knowledgeable. Tell us about auctions, since this is an auction show. You do auctions for the GSA. Tell us how that works, and if there's any upcoming auctions that we should know about.
Sure. Well, when we go through a process, I alluded to it a little bit, and I won't bog down on that, but at the end of our process, after we've seen if other federal agencies need it and what the community's interests are and if there are opportunities for public purpose, we get to a point where we're going to sell the property.
Okay.
We can't find it, for lack of a better term, if we can't find one of these grants programs to line it up in, we're going to go to a sale.
Okay.
And our preferred method of sale is the online auction. Now, we still do live outcry auctions. We do sealed bid auctions. We look to try to, use the right tool given the circumstances, the conditions, the issues related to the property. But in most cases, we find that the online auction through the Internet is a very cost-effective way to reach a really wide audience of potential bidders. So that's our preferred approach. The auction site that we use is realestatesales.gov. Real estate sales, all one word, .gov. And if you go on there right now, you'll see the sites that we have either coming soon or currently in active bidding. And it ranges from unimproved open space to historic lighthouses to general purpose office space, warehouses, really any kind of property the government owns, you'll find up on those websites. It varies. We got sales closing and coming on all the time. So anytime you look at it, you'll find a little different information. There's a good frequently asked questions section on there too. There's always a special process when you're dealing with the government, so we try to make it as easy as possible for bidders. But that website is our preferred way of selling. And we're now in our we've just recently changed it. We tried to be very public facing and public and private sector looking. We had a website called Auction RP as in real property .com. We liked the .com designation because it was that commercial designation. And a couple years ago, we were directed to change it to a .gov. So back in I think it was 2010, we changed it over to realestatesales.gov. So that's up and running right now, and that's where you'll find the properties we're selling.
Well, it's very interesting the properties that you sell because it's just not the typical stuff. And I went on the website, I'm going to say a couple weeks ago, and there's a couple of lighthouses for sale, just like you talked about. And so I went on the one, I think it was the North Carolina one off of Cape Hatteras, and I think it's Cape Hatteras, and it's out like a few miles, and one of your staff members, hopefully it wasn't you, actually went on the lighthouse that's out there and took videos, which it was very well done, but it was also kind of dangerous because of the rotting of the metal and everything. It was extremely well done. There was a lot of information on the website, so kudos to you and kudos to whoever went out there and got that video.
Yeah, well, that's a great example of the kind of work that we do. The Coast Guard has, as with everybody in the federal government, everyone's being asked to do more with less.
Yes.
The Coast Guard is a great example of that because when, after 9/11, they moved from the Department of Transportation to the Department of Homeland Security. So their Homeland Security requirements went up, and nobody gave them any break from their traditional responsibilities. They just added a whole bunch of other things. And there wasn't a whole lot of additional funding that came along with that. So as Coast Guard looked at their holdings, technology has really outpaced the need for a lighthouse. Now, we're big lighthouse fans. We love them. We think they're fantastic. People in the Coast Guard love them and think they're fantastic. But Coast Guard has to make a decision. Are they in the, protecting the seafaring public business, or are they in the historic preservation business? Because the seafaring public doesn't benefit necessarily from a lighthouse. Yes, they're a great day mark, but today with GPS and sonar and all the capability that your average boater has, the need for that lighthouse really is not the kind of thing the government should be involved in. So we developed a process wherein we looked at, first, the historic preservation of the light. That's the most important thing. We want to identify a steward who is going to take care of that thing long term, whether that's the local community, the state, the county, a historic preservation friends group, or through a public sale. But the first thing we try to do is give it away to the entity who will best preserve that light. At the end of the day, as you point out, a lot of these things are deteriorated. Mm-hmm. There are great costs associated with them. We don't get either expressions of interest or eligible entities, so we take those to sale.
Right.
And there are a lot of people out there that, are real historic preservation buffs and lighthouse enthusiasts that come in and buy these things, and they preserve them. So the government is getting the benefit of the day mark remaining. The public is getting the benefit of that traditional icon of their community remaining there, but an entity other than the federal government is going to maintain it.
Well, I think you also had a second lighthouse. I don't want to make this all about lighthouses, but it was on Long Island, and that was on land compared to, a couple miles out, which certainly should get you more interest, I would think. And do private sellers? Let's talk about potential bidders for these properties. What is a normal auction for deposit? Is there a percentage? Is there a closing time? Give us the general parameters, and I know there's differences in each kind of deal, but for our potential bidders that might go to your site and buy a property, tell us a little bit about what GSA rules and regulations are.
Sure. Well, there's really nothing standard or cookie cutter, if you will.
Okay.
About every single property is really there's a marketing plan and a delivery of that project specific to that particular project. So when you ask about something like what's the registration fee, well, the value of the property is going to drive your registration fee. Low value properties are going to have much lower registrations, and higher value properties are going to have higher on.
Right.
And then minimum bid. The minimum bid, again, is tied back to what our anticipated value of the property is. If we're looking at a $30 million asset ballpark, we're going to have a pretty significant down payment, bid deposit.
Right.
Bid deposit is going to probably be, $500,000 to get things started.
Okay.
Whereas we've got this offshore lighthouse with, some obsolescence issues, some access issues. We're going to want to get people interested. We're not going to scare people away with a $100,000 bid deposit. Right? We're going to look to have something more appropriate for the light and the value, and taking into consideration its condition and its challenges. So, really, every single one is going to be tailored to the specific issues and characteristics of the property. But the good news is, I know that seems like kind of a vague answer, but the good news is that with every one of these properties, when they're ready to go to sale, when a bidder is ready to bid, there's going to be an invitation for bid up on the website.
Okay.
And that's going to go right through all the terms and conditions. A lot of that is pretty boilerplate, but what the folks want to pay attention to are the special terms of sale, because there are special terms of sale tied to every single property, because every property is just a little bit different.
Right.
So I encourage anybody to read through, look at those, understand them. There'll be the name of a realty specialist who's handling the case right there, and contact information. So if any of you listeners are interested in this, they jump on and they take a look at, like, the lighthouse at Orient Point that you mentioned in Long Island.
Right.
If they want some additional information, there's going to be a name and a contact number there. They can look through. If their questions are answered and the information we have there, great. If they have additional questions, which they certainly may, there'll be a name and a phone number and an email for the person to contact that has specific detail about that property. They're the case manager.
Very, very interesting. Now, you alluded a little bit to the internet and how you do some live auctions, on-site auctions. You do internet auctions. How has the internet changed your life as far as disposing of these assets?
Well, as I said earlier, I think it's a very cost-effective way to reach a really broad audience. We get international marketing out of our online auction. So the costs are very, very manageable, and we spend something like $10,000 to $12,000 a year to manage it. Upgrades, modifications, those are all separate. But on average, just for the maintenance of it, it's about $10,000 a year to maintain that website.
Right.
And it's got all the functionality that we need. So you divide that by the 100 or so auctions we do a year. That's pretty cost effective.
Yeah.
Now, tied to that, obviously, a lot of people don't buy property sight unseen. So we'll hold open houses. We'll make the property available either by appointment, or we'll schedule an open house, whichever, depending on the level of interest. And
right.
people that are registered bidders, we certainly want to give them whatever access they need. Properties that are land-based, and in the middle of communities, very easy to get access to. Lighthouses and offshore lights are a little trickier. So,
yes.
But we still certainly respect the needs of a buyer to get out and see the property, get out there with his engineers, to figure out what the costs are going to be. So we accommodate all that. So you have the very traditional elements of, I need to get out there, kick the tires, feel the property, walk it, as well as, the online offering that, gives us, as I said, that very wide exposure.
Well, the thing that amazes me is, you have an asset and you think it might be local based as far as interest, and all of a sudden you see South America interest, you see European interest, you see California, you see Boston. It's become a smaller world.
Well, yeah, and it's funny, you talk about the close-to-home kind of things. I live on a little island in the Chesapeake Bay, so we got lighthouses all around us. And, so I paid careful attention to who bought the lighthouses, for lack of a better term, in my neighborhood.
Sure.
They're just the little offshore lights. And, I see, an attorney from Las Vegas bought one, an entity from Wisconsin bought another. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, again, we're talking about funny different properties. The one that I liked the most for the GSA was basically an abandoned military base down in Homestead, and all kinds of environmental problems. So I know what you guys go through. How many properties do you take care of? The United States government is the biggest landlord in the country, probably in the world. What are the numbers?
Yeah, well, we typically do. Things are, sales are down a little bit in the last couple of years. I think you talk to anybody in any real estate business and they'll tell you that. But typically, on average, last couple of years, we've done, 100 to 120 dispositions, and that covers everything. That's, your public benefits as well as your sales. But about 75% of our properties go to sale. So we go through this public process, make it available to entities with terms and conditions, and then we end up getting about 75% of them end up going to sale because we've gone through that process and either couldn't identify an eligible entity or there wasn't an expression of interest. So, so that amounts to, 75, 80 sales a year.
Nice.
So if you think about it on a, 1.5 a week.
Yep. Well, let's get these potential bidders to your site. What is your site again?
The website is really easy to remember. Real estate sales, one word, .gov. You can get up there, and right now I think there's probably about 8 or 10 properties up there, and it's the mix. There's a nice office building right on the Cleveland Airport. 2 buildings, probably roughly 100,000 square feet between the 2 buildings. Those are for sale. They're literally on the airport. Former NASA property connected to the NASA Glenn Space Center.
Ralph, I've got to cut you off. We're going to go to our break. Do you want to hold on, or I know you've got 1,000 things. We've got.
Nope, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity to get on and chat with you a little more. Come and see us next time you're in D.C. Thanks for hosting. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Ralph. I really appreciate your time and effort and your hospitality when I'm up there. You take care, my friend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Okay, we are back. You are listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. We are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida. We just had Ralph Connor on the show. He's the Director of Real Estate, Real Property for the General Services Administration, GSA, in Washington, D.C. Very knowledgeable guy. I had a chance to meet with him a couple of times when I've been up to Washington, D.C., he's got a good staff team and has a good knowledge of the auction. I want to thank again Ralph Connor, who is the Director of Real Estate for the GSA, General Service Administration in Washington, D.C. He took the time out this Friday morning to talk to us to basically educate our listening audience on what the GSA does as far as selling properties. We will be back next week. I want to thank you all for being tuned in, and you take care.